Secretary Pompeo, who is our senior counsel for global affairs, joining us now. Secretary, you made some news at the end of last week, made your decision on whether or not you were going to be a candidate in 2024, and ultimately decided not to be a candidate. What factors, for our audience who are used to hearing from you a couple times a week as part of the ACLJ team, and I think many of them were hoping you might run, certainly, what factors played into that decision?
Well, Jordan, thanks. And thanks to everyone out there who's been so kind and so supportive. I've heard from thousands of folks across the weekend just with encouragement. In the end, Jordan, Susan and I, my wife, Susan and I decided that this wasn't the right moment for us. For things such as momentous as putting yourself forward to be the president, everything's got to be right. And while we had spent the last year out talking to folks, learning, listening, preparing to run a campaign, we concluded at the end of the day that for a series of personal reasons, it just wasn't the right time for us. It doesn't mean the fight is not worthy. It doesn't mean I'm not going to continue to stay in this very battle that you and I, Jordan and Jay, are engaged in. But to run for president just didn't make sense for us at this time.
Yeah, I actually respect it because I think a lot of people get pushed by consultants and the business around campaigns, and then ultimately don't always make the decisions, feel like they make the decision on their own because they feel like, I've gotten too far down the path. And I respect it. Because, again, you're not going to lose your voice as a former Secretary of State. And one of those issues, because you did spend the time going around the country, what do you think is like the most pressing issue from state to state that you would hear kind of over this past year?
Jordan, it is a fear amongst Americans that is right that we are losing the most basic ideas that built this great country. It's the things you and I talk about every week, our ability to practice our faith, our ability to have the ability to speak freely, to carry firearms. The fact that we're teaching our kids garbage in schools, those are the things that I heard most often. They want to keep America safe. They want to keep America secure. But the things that impact families, that most important institution, the things that impact families most are the things that people are most worried about, and the things I hope whoever is this next president will confront in a very serious way inside our schools, inside our homes, and inside our churches and synagogues.
Secretary Pompeo, I wanted to also address, you have a new article up at aclj.org called Biden Ducks Accountability While America Grows Weaker. And you highlight the administration's response to the relationship between Xi and Putin and Macron's Taiwan comments, the intel leaks as president has been letting us down once again. What do we need to see out of the White House? Or what did we need to see out of the White House last week? How would have been a better response?
Oh, goodness. You just have to talk about the things that make America special and exceptional and great. It's not about arrogance. It's not about hubris. It's not about, we're better than you. It's that this country, with our Judeo-Christian heritage, our Declaration of Independence, our founding ideas, is special and unique. And when you hear folks denigrate it, when you see Putin say America is not worthy, when you see Xi say that America is in decline, or when a President Macron, an ally, a member of NATO, says we need to be closer to China and we need to distance ourselves from America, the White House, the president, has a responsibility to speak on behalf of the American people and clear that up and make very clear that we're not apologizing for our country. We're going to continue to build it and make it even more exceptional and even a greater beacon to the world.
And that's why I think, you're going to play an important role in this presidential cycle. You also mentioned your age. It's not like you don't have the opportunity to do this in the future, but I think you'll play an important role to anybody who ultimately becomes the candidate, looking to your advice on foreign policy and national security. And one of the issues, too, which we know is going to be front and center, is how the Biden team tried to, we haven't had this chance to talk to you about yet, tried to change the Afghanistan withdrawal narrative and really blame it on the Trump administration. And you called it a ridiculous, fantastical report. And that this claim that it was their hands were tied and it wasn't their fault that 13 Americans died or their policy decisions. It was all the previous administration, which would, of course, put the blame on you as well. And it did seem absurd, I think, to most of the American people who pay attention. But we know there's a lot of people who don't pay close attention, who still vote presidential elections. So what would you, to kind of push back on that narrative, what would you say?
Well, first of all, Jordan, it was a ludicrous proposition that somehow President Biden didn't have the freedom to defend America. He's the president of the United States, for goodness sake. He had every flexibility to make whatever decision he wanted about how to proceed in Afghanistan. We'd made a set of decisions. We drew forces down on my watch from about 15,000 to 2,500 but could never get all the way out because we knew that the risk of what happened was real. And President Biden just made a different decision. And to try and shift blame for something as serious as this, frankly, it's not about protecting my reputation or, frankly, that of President Trump either. It's about the soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines who served there for 20 years. And what President Biden did there, his decision was indecent. It resulted in the death of 13 Americans and countless Americans left behind, hurt our standing and resolve in the world in ways that we are still suffering from. That happened under President Biden and on his watch and was his direct decision. And to try and either shift blame or move accountability, the American people aren't buying that story, and it is indecent for a president to try to do that.
Yeah, no, it seems so disingenuous when it was done because, as you said, I mean, when you become president of the United States, you're the commander-in-chief. You make the calls, you make the decisions, you get your advice from all of your counsel, but ultimately you make those calls and you have a lot of flexibility, especially 18 months in. To me, it was just living in a fantasy world, but they obviously feel like to some extent they can get away with it, and that people will believe them and just kind of not second guess even those kind of absurd claims. And we're talking about a lot of the rise in violent crime today. The final question to you too is I feel like that probably ties back to when you're going around the country, people feel like they're kind of losing what our country is about, because when you feel like your community is out of control, whether it's drugs or mental illness and all these issues that kind of piled up, and that we're seeing that they're going untreated, and whether the treatment is prosecutions and being tough on crime and supporting the police and making sure we have police in communities, or it's mental health programs. It's probably a mix of both. It just feels like we're not getting the job done for our communities.
No, I think that's right. And it is certainly the violent crime. It's the fact that we're not prosecuting folks who steal stuff from Walgreens, and the second order ramifications, right? The follow on from that is more homeless people on the streets, more risk, people having to stay at home when they wanted to go out, drugs available widely, cheaply, because they can cross our southern border because we're not enforcing our basic laws at our southern border. These are the things the American people can see. We need American leaders to step up. This isn't political, Jordan. There's no Republican and Democrat laws. There's only a border to enforce and basic criminal codes that would need to be enforced. And when you don't do that, whether it's at the federal level or district attorneys, Americans across the board are worse off for that.
Secretary Pompeo, we appreciate you joining us. Appreciate you being part of our team.